During his campaign, he said, "I alone can fix it." Why doesn't he do it now? I'm Scott Ott with Bill Whittle and Stephen Green. This episode of Right Angles brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. Gentlemen, it's been all over the news and everyone's been all a Twitter about the fact that parents are being separated from their children and vice versa at the border in McAllen, Texas and elsewhere because the Trump administration has decided to enforce the law and so-called crack down on these misdemeanor border crossings. Here's the question, though, gentlemen. The president, his wife, Mark Short, his director of legislative affairs, and any number of other spokespeople for the administration have all said what a horrible thing it is that parents are being separated from their children at the border. Now, the president has said that it's the fault of the Democrats, who could end it very quickly if they would merely produce a few votes that they would need to create a supermajority in the Senate and get the legislation, which he points out was democratically passed legislation, changed so that parents wouldn't be separated from their children at the border. But that's not the point. What do you make, Bill Whittle, of a guy who runs for office saying, "I can fix it," then gets in office and says, "I think that's a horrible situation," but won't fix it?
Well, the fact that we're having this discussion means that something's happening that wasn't happening before, right? I mean, I don't mean for a second to say I'm satisfied with this. It's 18 months. I haven't seen any of this wall we were promised. I'll get to that in a second. But the fact is that we are having the conversation because he's doing something different and is, in fact, thinking about actually enforcing this law. I think one of the most on-target things I've ever said, certainly it surprised the hell out of me, was, look, we need a wall because the Democrats wouldn't let us have a border. When you have a border, it's a secure and patrolled border, and people are allowed in legally through certain entry points and so on. You don't need a wall. You don't need all of this stuff. So let me just get to this business about families being ripped apart and so on, and who's responsible for this. Let me give our progressive friends an example that even they can understand. Forget about the honest campesino who's trudging through the desert on his trusty bureau. Let's put all that aside for a second. Go with something that you can understand as a progressive from San Francisco. Let's say that you decided to take your family. Well, you don't have any families, but let's just say you decided to take some children that you adopted temporarily, and you were going to fly to Japan on board Japanese Airlines, and you went down to San Francisco Airport, and by some legerdemain or other, which means chicory and magic for you progressive guys, you managed to get on board the plane. This is the point. You get on board the plane with your family, you fly to Japan, and when you get off of the plane in Japan, you understand, you knew the whole time, that you don't have a passport and you don't have a visa. Well, guess what's going to happen to you upon your arrival in Japan? You're going to be separated from your family. You're going to be separated from your family because the Japanese officials responsible for keeping their country a country are going to ask what on earth possessed you, a grown man, to think that you could get into this country and just walk in without a passport and a visa. They'd look at you as if there was something seriously wrong with you mentally, and they'd be right. And then you'd have to ask yourself the question of why did you put your children through this humiliation and this disgrace and this trauma? Because I know, and you know, and everybody else knows that if I try to fly to Japan without a passport or a visa, I'm going to be detained, I'm going to be separated from my family, I'm going to be questioned, and then I'm going to be sent back home. And this is not a mystery to me. I know this in advance. So who's responsible for this? Would that be the responsibility of the Japanese Prime Minister? Is that his cruelty in action? Because he wouldn't let me bring my family on an airplane without passports and visa into Japan, and he had the audacity to separate me from my children so that they wouldn't have to be humiliated by the simple questions they're asking me about what kind of a lunatic I must be? I mean, honestly, this is exactly the situation. The people that have made the fundamental decision are the parents that bring their children on this illegal activity. But the reason they do it, I'm not insensitive to this. I live in Los Angeles. I know a number of fine, hardworking Mexican people here, the hardest working people I've ever seen. I understand there are reasons for them wanting to get here, but the fact of the matter is, as I said, since they wouldn't let us have to have a border, we have to have a wall. And these open immigration policies of the last 8 years, and before that too, the idea that if you could just get up and walk across the border, you're in, you're home free, you're set, is what's responsible for bringing these people here. And when enough people get turned away so that they realize that this is no longer a simple ticket to walk into this country, then slowly we'll be separating fewer people at the border from their families before returning them together and sending them back home, not in a barge or on a, in a chain gang. We're going to return them home and ask them to take the same kind of fundamental preparations that any of us would make if we went to somebody else's country.
I saw a woman interviewed who was about to cross the border. She had a couple of kids with her, and the reporter from MSNBC asked her, and like the camera went down and got a close-up shot of the kids and said, "You know that there's been a change of policy," is the way she termed it, and she was translating her own English into Spanish at the time. There really hasn't been a change of law, but the Trump administration has clearly used their prosecutorial discretion to begin enforcing a law that the Obama administration had decided they were only going to enforce when it came to criminals who had committed a crime other than border crossing, beyond border crossing, dangerous criminals, as they would put them. But in any case, the reporter asked the woman, "Do you know there's been a policy? You may be separated from your children if you cross this border. Are you going to cross the border?" She said, "Yes, I am."
Of course she is.
Okay. So the question I want to ask, Stephen Green, you're a dad. You got a couple of kids. Yeah. How bad does it have to be in Honduras for you to say, you know what? It's worth it to crawl across the border into the United States and know that I may lose touch with my kids for some matter of days, weeks, months, or more?
Well, if you've weighed the economic and in the case of a country like Honduras, probably also the political costs of staying at a home, you may decide that it's worth the risk. However, let's say I am a dad. I've got two kids, almost 8 and 12 and a half now. Couldn't be prouder of my boys. Let's say I took my kids with me down to Walmart and decided to go on a shooting spree at Walmart because, shooting sprees are all the rage these days. So I shoot some people at Walmart and the cops show up and I throw down my gun so they handcuff me instead of shooting me. And as they take me away, I say, "But you're separating me from my children." Do I really have anything to complain about? I knew the consequences going in, that if you break a law, it doesn't really matter what the law is, you will be, if you are arrested, separated from your children. Those are just the facts. Now, I may decide that I think it's worth the risk because I just really want to shoot up a Walmart, or if I'm somebody looking in Honduras looking for a better future, I may decide to take the risk too. But what I give up when I break the law is the right to complain about what happens to me next. All right? That's just the way that works. You
kind of amped up that analogy pretty quickly, and the Honduran woman would say, "No, I was escaping a shootout at a Walmart when I left Honduras."
Well, and maybe she was, and I am completely sympathetic to their plight. I believe that America is a nation of immigrants, and that our immigration laws are very stupid right now. We need immigration reform. I don't like this comprehensive word, but I think we can have more immigrants, but without... I won't get into that. It's off the topic. What I'd rather talk about is the situation that we have. Lenin had a thing that he said when he was trying to seize power in Russia, which was the worse, the better. In other words, this is World War I. The worse the Russian army does in the field, the better it is for me.
That's it.
The worse the peasants are starving out in the fields, the better it is for me. The worse the working conditions are in the cities, the better it is for me, because I can use all of this stuff to agitate, to overthrow the Tsar, and then seize power. The worse, the better. And if you think I'm exaggerating about this, let me give you something from John Storr. I'm unfamiliar with him. I found him on Twitter, but he's a media personality of some kind. He's got like 20,000 followers or something. He tweeted today, "If Dems join GOP in bill protecting kids, they will be bailing out the GOP, rewarding the party for years of soft on-crime slander. This is on Trump's head. Let it roll." In other words, he's holding these kids hostages to make the situation worse so that Democrats don't join in rescuing Donald Trump for enforcing a Democrat law. The worse, the better, Scott. This is what they aim to do. This isn't about kids. This isn't about our dumb immigration laws. This isn't about how poorly our dumb immigration laws are enforced. This is about making Republicans look bad, and goddamn everything else is their attitude, Scott.
You know, I can't disagree with your characterization of what the left is trying to do, but I think too often the debate in this country gets down to our characterizing what the other side is trying to do. And frankly, in this situation, I don't really care what the other side is trying to do. I mean, what I do care about is the fact that there are people in the world who are so desperate for to be in the United States of America that they're willing to put their lives into the hands of ruthless coyotes and drug mules who are smuggling them into the United States and making great profits in doing so. I do care about the fact, frankly, as the president does, as his wife does, and all the living first ladies recently came out with statements too. I do care about the fact that there is a situation at our border now where families are being torn apart. I mean, I've been in a situation where I came home and did not know where my daughter was. Okay, years and years ago, but I've been in that situation. I didn't think she was, in the hands of terrorists or criminals or even law enforcement, but I know that anxiety and what that feels like. And so when you see that kind of situation developing at the border, and you see the White House saying it's wrong, and you see the Democrats saying it's wrong, and both sides saying, if it weren't for the other side, this could be fixed. The White House is basically saying, hey, Democrats in Congress, change the law. And the Democrats are saying, hey, President Trump, you have the power to not selectively prosecute these people. You can decide to not prosecute, as you have decided not to prosecute most small drug crimes in this country, as the law enforcement has decided not to catch every single person who violates the speed limit. There's a whole lot of selective prosecution going on in this country. Why not in this case do what's right in the name of the children? So I'm not coming down on either side of this. And frankly, at this point in it, I don't know how this is going to play out. As we record this, the president is scheduled to meet with Republicans in Congress this evening and to discuss the approach to this. What I hope it does, and Bill kind of hinted at this, what I hope it does is that Trump has created a flashpoint for discussion around a problem that's been kicked down the road for too long, and we need to be able to do something about it. Having laws we don't enforce is no law at all. Saying, that really the reason why we're enforcing this is just because we're people who are for the rule of law is disingenuous too, I think, because we don't do that with everything. Trump is trying to make a point. Will he make that point to the effect that we get a more sensible border policy? Will we build a wall where a wall is needed? Will we open up ports of entry? Will we reduce quotas for countries or increase quotas for countries or get rid of the whole quota stupid system? Will we change the chain migration thing between relatives? Will we make it easier for employers to bring in employees or harder for them to do so? All of these are core structural process issues that I think are being ignored because some guy from AP got a beautiful shot of a little girl crying as a law enforcement officer was taking her mother into custody. And I think we are losing that cultural battle because we don't have pictures like that for so-called our side. And I think we are being disingenuous in some ways. I don't mean you guys, but I just think that the right in many ways is being disingenuous about it, what its real intentions are. And I just want to see more honesty in this discussion, and I want to see more compassion in this process, and I want to see this country live up to the ideals which founded it, and I want to see us begin to treat each other with dignity and respect. Not to mention those who sojourn among us, whether they got here illegally or legally. I think we need to have a process that follows the rule of law and that shows that we are people of dignity and morality. For Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making Right Angle possible.